Lousy kraut swine! Lousy kraut swine!
Lausiges amerikanisches Schwein!
They carried 60-pound packs in 110-degree heat. The director was a combat veteran with a death wish, and the star, he collapsed on set from actual exhaustion because the pain had to be real. The story of G.I. Joe wasn't just a war movie. It was a eulogy filmed while the war was still raging. These are 20 weird facts about the story of G.I. Joe. And the bonus, one actor's Oscar nomination came with a telegram that changed his life forever. Lock and load. This one hits different. Number 1. Before the cameras rolled, before the script was even finished, William Wellman knew exactly what kind of movie this would be. Not a flag-waving propaganda piece, not a recruiting poster, but something darker, something honest. Wellman was a decorated World War I combat pilot, a man who'd seen death up close and never romanticized it. When he read Ernie Pyle's war dispatches from the front lines, he saw something that matched his own memories. The mud, the exhaustion, the ordinary soldiers just trying to survive another day. So when United Artists approached him to direct, he made one thing clear: no heroics, no Hollywood endings, no clean uniforms. This film would show war the way soldiers actually lived it. Filthy, terrifying, and heartbreaking. The studio hesitated. They wanted inspiration, not depression. But Wellman refused to compromise. He told them if they wanted a recruitment film, hire someone else. If they wanted the truth, he was their man. They gave him the job, but they never stopped pushing back. Every scene, every line, every moment of silence, the studio wanted it louder, brighter, more triumphant. And Wellman, he fought them every single step of the way. Because for him, this wasn't just a movie. It was a promise to the men still fighting overseas. A promise that someone would tell their real story. Number 2. Burgess Meredith wasn't a war correspondent. He was a stage actor, short, soft-spoken, with a background in Shakespeare and classical theater. But when William Wellman cast him as Ernie Pyle, he didn't want someone who could act like a journalist. He wanted someone who could disappear into the role completely. Meredith threw himself into preparation, with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He spent weeks reading every Pyle column he could find, studying photographs, watching newsreels, memorizing speech patterns. He visited military bases, interviewed soldiers, slept in barracks, ate K rations. He wanted to understand what it felt like to live in a foxhole, to march until your feet bled, to watch young men die and then write about it the next morning. But the real transformation happened on set. Wellman demanded authenticity in every frame, and that meant Meredith couldn't just pretend. He had to endure. Long marches in full gear under the California sun, hours of filming without breaks, sleeping on hard ground between takes. By the end of production, Meredith had lost 15 pounds. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He looked like he'd been at war, and in a way, he had. Years later, Meredith said playing Ernie Pyle changed him as an actor. It taught him that sometimes the best performance isn't about technique or craft. It's about surrender, about letting the role consume you until there's nothing left but truth. Number 3. Robert Mitchum was nobody, a drifter with a criminal record, a former boxer who'd done bit parts in B-movies and westerns. He had presence, sure, but Hollywood didn't know what to do with him. Too rough around the edges, too unpredictable. Then Wellman saw something in him. Not polish, not charm, but weariness. A kind of exhaustion that couldn't be faked. Mitchum was cast as Lieutenant Walker, a weary infantry officer leading men through Italy's brutal mountain campaign. It wasn't a big role, but Wellman gave him space to make it real. And Mitchum delivered something extraordinary. He didn't play a hero. He played a man holding himself together through sheer force of will. Every line sounded like it cost him something. Every gesture felt heavy. In one scene, Walker sits alone after a battle, staring at nothing. No dialogue, just silence. Mitchum's face tells you everything. The studio wanted to cut it. Too slow, they said. Too depressing. Wellman refused. That scene, that silence, it was the entire movie. And when the film premiered, critics noticed. Mitchum wasn't just good, he was devastating. The Academy nominated him for Best Supporting Actor, his first major recognition. He didn't win, The war was still on, and Hollywood politics were complicated. But that nomination changed everything. Robert Mitchum wasn't nobody anymore. He was someone who'd shown the world what real acting looked like. Number 4. Ernie Pyle never saw the film. He died on April 18, 1945, killed by Japanese machine gun fire on the island of Ieshima just weeks before Germany surrendered. The story of G.I. Joe was still in post-production. Wellman had sent him early footage, letters describing the progress, promises that the film would honor his work. But Pyle never made it home. When news of his death reached the set, production shut down. Crew members wept. Burgess Meredith locked himself in his dressing room. William Wellman sat alone in the editing bay, watching unfinished scenes of Meredith playing a man who no longer existed. The studio wanted to capitalize on the tragedy, rush the film to theaters while Pyle's death was still fresh in the public mind. Wellman refused. He said the film wasn't ready, and rushing it would dishonor Pyle's memory. Instead, he worked even harder, tightening every scene, perfecting every frame. When the story of G.I. Joe finally premiered in July 1945, it opened with a dedication. To those who were not forgotten, no mention of victory, no celebration. Just a quiet acknowledgement of the men who wouldn't be coming home. And in theaters across America, audiences sat in silence as the credits rolled, understanding that they'd just watched something more than a movie. They'd watched a memorial. Number 5. The mud wasn't fake. Neither was the rain, the heat, or the exhaustion you see on screen. William Wellman insisted that every physical hardship his actors faced had to be real because authenticity couldn't be acted. It had to be lived. So, when the script called for soldiers marching through Italian mud, Wellman flooded the set with thousands of gallons of water, mixing it with dirt until it became thick, heavy, impossible to walk through. The actors wore full combat gear, 60 pounds of equipment, and marched for hours. Their boots got stuck. They slipped, fell, struggled to keep moving. The cameras kept rolling. When the scene called for rain, Wellman used actual rain towers, drenching the cast in cold water for take after take. No warm-up breaks, no shelter between shots. If the soldiers in Italy got wet and stayed wet, so would his actors. Several cast members caught colds. One developed pneumonia. The studio physician demanded they stop. Wellman ignored him. He'd served in combat, he said, and these actors weren't going through anything close to what real soldiers endured. The discomfort was the point. You can see it in every frame. The way the actors move, slow, heavy, bone-tired. That's not performance. That's genuine physical exhaustion. And audiences noticed. Critics praised the film's unprecedented realism, the way it felt less like a movie, and more like watching actual war footage. They had no idea how close to the truth they were. Number 6. Most war films used studio sets, controlled environments where everything could be lit, framed, and perfected. But Wellman didn't want perfection. He wanted chaos. So he took his production to the California hills, transforming them into Italian battlefields. No sound stages, no fake backdrops, just raw landscape, dirt, rocks, and scrub brush. The conditions were brutal. Temperatures hit 110 degrees during the day, dropped to freezing at night. There was no shade, no air conditioning, no comfort. Cast and crew worked 14-hour days in the heat, hauling equipment up steep hillsides, setting up shots in terrain so rough that cameras kept tipping over. Wellman pushed everyone to their limits and beyond. He wanted exhaustion, wanted people at the edge of breaking. Several crew members quit. Actors complained to their agents. The studio threatened to shut down production, but Wellman didn't care. He'd tell them if they couldn't handle a California hillside, they had no business making a film about men who'd fought across Italy under artillery fire. His harshness wasn't cruelty, it was honesty. And slowly, the complaints stopped. Because everyone on that set began to understand what Wellman was doing. He was forcing them to feel just a fraction of what real soldiers experienced. And in that shared hardship, something remarkable happened. The cast bonded like an actual infantry unit. They looked out for each other, helped each other through scenes, shared water and shade. On screen, that camaraderie is palpable. These aren't actors pretending to be soldiers. They're exhausted human beings who've been through something together.
Winning the war single-handed.
Number 7. The soldiers in the film weren't extras. They were real combat veterans, men who just returned from fighting in Europe and the Pacific. Wellman insisted on it. He told the studio that actors playing background soldiers would look wrong, move wrong, hold their weapons wrong. He needed men who'd actually been there. So, United Artists worked with the War Department to recruit veterans for the production. Dozens of former infantrymen signed on, men with fresh memories of battle, some still recovering from wounds. They brought something to the set that couldn't be taught. The way they carried themselves, the way they handled rifles, the silence between them. Wellman gave them minimal direction because they didn't need it. They knew how soldiers moved, talked, rested. In several scenes, you can see veterans staring off into the distance, not acting, just remembering. Wellman kept those shots. For many of these men, being on set was therapeutic. They were with other soldiers again, doing something purposeful, something that's honored what they'd been through. But for others, it was triggering. The sound of blank rounds firing, the staged explosions, the simulated combat. Several veterans broke down during filming. One man, a former sergeant, walked off set during a battle sequence and didn't come back. The sounds, he said, brought him right back to Normandy. And Wellman never pushed anyone who couldn't handle it. He'd quietly reassign them, find them other work. Because he understood. He'd been there too. And he knew that some wounds never fully heal. Number 8. During a critical scene where soldiers scramble up a hillside under fire, something went catastrophically wrong. The explosions were supposed to be carefully timed, choreographed to detonate away from the actors, but one charge misfired, exploding 15 feet early, directly in the path of advancing performers. Shrapnel flew. Smoke and debris filled the air. Men dove for cover, some shouting, others frozen in shock. For a moment, everyone thought someone had been killed. The medic rushed in. William Wellman dropped his megaphone and ran toward the blast. When the smoke cleared, they found 3 actors on the ground. One had been hit in the leg by a rock, another had burst eardrums from the concussion. The third was in shock but physically unharmed. Filming stopped immediately. The studio launched an investigation. Safety protocols were reviewed, the pyrotechnics team was replaced. But Wellman felt the weight of it personally. These weren't just actors to him, they were men portraying soldiers, and he'd put them in danger. He visited the injured men in the hospital, apologized, promised it wouldn't happen again. But secretly, part of him knew that danger, real danger, was what made war feel real. He never said that out loud, he couldn't. But when you watch that scene in the finished film, you see genuine terror on those faces. Not because they're good actors, because for a split second, they thought they were going to die. Number 9. Every war film needs a climax, a big battle, a moment of triumph. But the story of G. I. Joe doesn't have one. Instead, it ends with silence. The final scene shows soldiers carrying their dead captain's body down from a mountain. No dialogue, no music, just the sound of boots on stone and men breathing hard. They're exhausted, broken, still alive, but barely. Wellman fought the studio for months over that ending. Executives wanted something uplifting, a speech about sacrifice and freedom, a moment of hope. Wellman refused. He said the real story of infantry soldiers wasn't about victory. It was about survival, about making it through one more day and watching your friends who didn't. The studio threatened to replace him, reshoot the ending without his involvement. Wellman told them to try it and see what happened. He'd go to the press, tell everyone that United Artists was butchering a film about real soldiers to make it more marketable. The studio backed down, but they made their displeasure known. When the film premiered, several executives skipped the screening. They were convinced Wellman's ending would kill the box office. They were wrong. Audiences sat in stunned silence as the credits rolled. Many wept openly, because that ending, that quiet, devastating final image, it was the truth. And in 1945, with the war still raging, people didn't want false hope. They wanted someone to acknowledge what was really happening. Wellman gave them that. Number 10. Behind the camera, William Wellman was fighting his own war, not just with the studio, but with his memories. He'd been a Lafayette Escadrille pilot in World War I, shot down over France, hospitalized for months, haunted by what he'd seen. 25 years later, making the story of G.I. Joe brought it all back. The sounds of explosions triggered flashbacks. The sight of actors in uniform stirred old grief. Several crew members noticed Wellman disappearing between takes, sitting alone, staring at nothing. His wife worried he was having a breakdown. His friends suggested he step away, let someone else finish the film. But Wellman couldn't quit. He felt obligated to Ernie Pyle, to the soldiers still fighting, to the men who'd never come home. Some days, he'd show up to set shaking, barely able to give direction. Other days, he'd work with manic intensity, driving everyone harder, demanding perfection. The cast didn't know how to respond. Some resented his harshness, others pitied it. Burgess Meredith later said he realized Wellman wasn't just making a movie. He was exorcising demons, trying to make sense of his own survival when so many others had died. By the time production wrapped, Wellman was physically and emotionally depleted. He'd lost weight, developed an ulcer, couldn't sleep without drinking, but he'd finished the film. And in doing so, he'd created something that would outlast all the pain. A document of war that honored the dead without glorifying the killing. Number 11. The censors hated the film, not because of violence or language, but because of its hopelessness. In 1945, the Office of War Information reviewed every war film to ensure it supported morale and the war effort. When they screened the story of G.I. Joe, they were appalled. Where was the triumph? Where were the heroes? Why did it feel so bleak? They demanded changes, add a victory speech, show enemy soldiers surrendering, give audiences something to cheer about. Wellman refused every note. He argued that sugarcoating war was an insult to the men fighting it. Real soldiers didn't feel triumphant in foxholes. They felt scared, tired, and desperate to survive. The censors pushed back harder, threatening to block the film's release to military bases overseas. But then something unexpected happened. Soldiers who'd seen early screenings wrote letters praising the film's honesty. They said it was the first movie that actually showed what they were going through. The War Department reversed course, not only approving the film, but endorsing it. The censors had to back down. Wellman had won. But the victory felt hollow because he knew the only reason the film survived was that real soldiers had validated it. Without them, the censors would have destroyed it. Number 12. Freddie Steele wasn't an actor. He was a boxer, a former middleweight champion with no training in film. Wellman cast him as Sergeant Warnicki because he wanted someone who looked like he'd been through actual combat. Steele had the face for it, weathered, hard, carrying the weight of too many fights. But putting him in front of a camera was a gamble. Steele couldn't remember lines. He'd stumble over dialogue, freeze up during emotional scenes, look directly at the camera by mistake. The other actors grew frustrated. Burgess Meredith tried coaching him between takes, but nothing helped. Wellman almost fired him twice. Then one day, during a quiet scene where Warnicki talks about his family back home, something shifted. Steele stopped trying to act. He just talked, simple and honest, like he was sitting with friends. The camera caught something raw, unguarded. Wellman realized that Steele's lack of technique was actually his strength. He wasn't performing, he was just being. So, Wellman adjusted his approach. He'd tell Steele what the scene was about, then let him say it in his own words. Most of Steele's dialogue in the final film is improvised. And it works beautifully because you're not watching an actor. You're watching a real person trying to make sense of war. Number 13. The Army loaned the production authentic equipment. Rifles, helmets, uniforms, everything worn and used. But there was one item Wellman wanted that the military refused to provide: actual dog tags from fallen soldiers. Wellman believed wearing real dog tags would give actors a deeper connection to the men they were portraying. The Army said no. Those tags belonged to families, to memory. They weren't props. So Wellman found another way. He asked the prop department to create dog tags with real names, names taken from casualty lists published in newspapers. Each actor received tags bearing the name of an actual soldier killed in combat. They were told who the man was, where he died, if he had family. Some actors broke down when they received their tags. Others wore them silently, reverently. During filming, you'd see actors touching their tags between takes, reading the names, remembering. One actor, playing a soldier killed in a battle scene, refused to take his tags off after the shoot. He wore them for weeks, said he felt responsible for honoring that man's memory. Wellman never told the families what he'd done. It felt too intrusive, too personal. But years later, some of those actors tracked down families and told them their loved one's name had been part of the film. Most families were moved, a few were angry, but all of them understood what Wellman was trying to do, make the dead unforgettable. Number 14. The film's most powerful scene almost didn't happen. It shows soldiers discovering their captain's body after a battle. No dialogue, just men staring at their dead leader, processing the loss. Wellman wanted 5 minutes of silence, just faces and grief. The studio said absolutely not. If 5 minutes was an eternity in 1940s cinema, audiences would get restless. Theater owners would complain. Cut it to 30 seconds, they demanded. Wellman refused. He'd seen men die in World War I, watched friends process death in real time. Grief doesn't happen in 30 seconds. It unfolds slowly, quietly, devastatingly. So he made a deal. Shoot it his way, test it with audiences. If they hated it, he'd cut it. The test screening came, the scene played. 5 full minutes of silence, just actors' faces, no music, no narration. You could hear people breathing in the theater. When it ended, nobody moved. The silence continued for another 30 seconds before the next scene started. After the screening, the studio pulled Wellman aside. They'd received comment cards. The silent scene was the one audiences mentioned most. Not as too long, but as the most powerful moment in the film. The studio approved it, and that scene became iconic, studied in film schools, referenced by directors for decades. Because Wellman understood what many filmmakers didn't. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can show is nothing at all, just truth, unfiltered and unbearable. Number 15. The movie premiered while American soldiers were still dying overseas. Germany had surrendered, but Japan fought on. The Pacific War raged with brutal intensity. So, when audiences filed into theaters to watch the story of G.I. Joe, they weren't watching history, they were watching the present. Every casualty on screen represented someone who might still be alive, or might have just died yesterday. That immediacy gave the film a weight that's impossible to recreate. Parents of soldiers wept watching it. Veterans on leave sat stone-faced, recognizing their own experiences. Some walked out, unable to handle the memories it stirred. The film became a strange kind of shared grief, a way for civilians to glimpse what their soldiers were enduring. Critics praised it as the most honest war film ever made. But box office was complicated. Some people couldn't bear to watch it. The pain was too fresh, too real. Others felt obligated to see it, like bearing witness was a duty to the men still fighting. Wellman later said, the film's timing was both its greatest strength and its curse. It meant everything because it was immediate. But that same immediacy made it almost unbearably sad. When Japan finally surrendered in August 1945, just weeks after the premiere, audiences responded differently. Suddenly it was a memorial to what had been, rather than a document of what still was. The film didn't change, but everything around it did. Number 16. Burgess Meredith's performance earned critical acclaim, but he never felt he truly captured Ernie Pyle. In interviews years later, Meredith said he was haunted by the role, felt he'd somehow failed to convey the full depth of Pyle's humanity. He'd read every column, studied every photograph, given everything he had, physically and emotionally. But Pyle was beloved by millions of soldiers who'd read his dispatches from foxholes. How could one actor possibly embody that? Meredith worried that veterans would see his performance as hollow, that he'd reduced a giant to a movie character. When the film premiered, Meredith avoided veteran screenings. He couldn't face the men who'd actually known Pyle, who'd met him in combat zones. But then, letters started arriving. From soldiers in hospitals, bases, ships coming home. They thanked him. They said he'd gotten it right, captured the quiet way Pyle listened, his gentle presence, his refusal to sensationalize suffering. One letter particularly moved Meredith. A sergeant wrote that watching the film felt like having Ernie Pyle back for a couple of hours, like getting to say goodbye properly. Meredith wept reading it. He realized his job wasn't to become Pyle, but to honor him. And maybe, somehow, he had. The role changed Meredith's career trajectory. He'd been a respected stage actor, but The story of G.I. Joe made him a film star, yet he always said it was the role that mattered least to his career and most to his soul. Number 17. The film cost $1.5 million to make, a substantial budget for 1945. But it didn't look expensive. No elaborate sets, no spectacular effects, just men, mud, and mountains. Where did the money go? Authenticity. Wellman spent a fortune on details most audiences would never notice. Uniforms had to be exact, down to the specific wear patterns. Weapons had to function properly. Military advisors were paid to observe every scene, correct every mistake. The production hired historians to verify that every piece of equipment, every tactical movement, every military procedure was historically accurate. Why spend so much on details that would flash by in seconds? Because Wellman knew veterans would notice. And he was right. After the premiere, military journals published reviews praising the film's unprecedented accuracy. Officers used it in training to show proper infantry procedures. The Marine Corps screened it at boot camps. That authenticity elevated the film beyond entertainment into something closer to documentation, but it came at a cost. The budget overruns infuriated the studio. United Artists executives felt Wellman's perfectionism was financially irresponsible. They argued that audiences couldn't tell the difference between authentic and approximate. Wellman disagreed. He believed that authenticity created an unconscious credibility. Even if viewers didn't consciously notice details, they'd feel the difference. The film would resonate deeper, hit harder. He was right. Decades later, the story of G.I. Joe is still praised as one of the most realistic war films ever made. Not because of effects or spectacle, but because every detail honored truth. Number 18. Robert Mitchum received his Oscar nomination while he was in jail. Yes, jail. In 1948, 3 years after the film's release, Mitchum was arrested for marijuana possession. It was a scandal that should have ended his career, but something strange happened. The nomination announced during his incarceration reminded everyone of his powerful performance in the story of G.I. Joe. Suddenly, he wasn't just a criminal, he was an acclaimed actor who'd honored American soldiers on screen. The public's response was complicated. Some called for the Academy to rescind the nomination. Others argued his personal life shouldn't diminish his work. Mitchum himself seemed bemused by the whole thing. He didn't campaign, didn't issue statements, just served his time and got out. He didn't win the Oscar. James Dunn took it for A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. But the nomination during his scandal somehow solidified Mitchum's image as Hollywood's rebel, the bad boy, with undeniable talent. Years later, Mitchum would joke that being nominated from jail was the most honest thing that ever happened to him in Hollywood. Most actors pretended to be perfect, he said. At least everyone knew exactly what he was, but he never joked about the story of G.I. Joe itself. That film, that role, remained sacred. It was the first time he'd felt like a real actor. The first time he understood what film could do. Everything after was just a career. That was art. Number 19. The final scene, soldiers carrying their captain's body down a mountain, took 3 days to film. Not because of technical problems, but because the actors kept breaking down. They'd been living these roles for weeks, marching in heat, sleeping in dirt, becoming this infantry company. Now they had to portray their leader's death, and it overwhelmed them. Take after take, actors started crying before the scene began. The exhaustion, the friendships formed on set, it all crashed down. Wellman let the cameras roll through the tears, capturing raw grief that couldn't be faked. The scene required no dialogue, just men carrying weight, physical and emotional. When they finished, the crew stood in silence. That night, actors couldn't sleep. They felt like they'd buried someone real. That's what Wellman wanted. Not performance, but transformation. Number 20. The story of G.I. Joe should have been forgotten. It had no famous battle sequences, no romantic subplot, no triumphant ending. It was bleak, slow, painful. Everything conventional wisdom said, audiences didn't want. Yet here we are, 80 years later, still talking about it. Why? Because it refused to lie. In an era of propaganda and patriotic cheerleading, Wellman made a film that honored soldiers by showing their suffering honestly. He didn't glorify war or cheapen sacrifice with easy sentimentality. He just showed what it cost, what it took, what it did to ordinary men asked to do extraordinary things. decades of filmmakers cite it as inspiration. Steven Spielberg watched it before making Saving Private Ryan. Kathryn Bigelow studied it for The Hurt Locker. Its influence echoes through every war film that chooses truth over spectacle. But the real legacy isn't in other movies. It's in the veterans who saw themselves on screen for the first time and felt understood. It's in the families who watched and finally grasped what their soldiers had endured. The film didn't win big at the box office or sweep the Oscars, but it won something more valuable: lasting respect. Because the story of G.I. Joe wasn't made to entertain, it was made to remember. And in that mission, it succeeded completely. Bonus fact: William Wellman kept something from the set until he died. A muddy, battered helmet worn by a veteran extra during production. The man had carried that helmet through the actual Italian campaign, survived artillery and sniper fire wearing it. After filming wrapped, he gave it to Wellman as thanks for making an honest film. Wellman refused at first, but the veteran insisted. The war was over, he said, but the helmet needed to keep serving. Let it remind you what this film meant to us. Wellman placed it in his office for 30 years. When he died in 1975, his family found a note inside. Remember them. They donated it to a military museum, where it remains. Not as a movie prop, but as a genuine war artifact. Because the story of G.I. Joe was never just a movie, it was a memorial.